Hey there, food fans. Welcome back to the Food for Thoughtcast with me, your host, Melissa Reagan, and my co-host with the most, Chef Steven Gonzalez. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, I couldn't be any better. I'm so excited about our guest today. Please welcome
Yes, me
Veeda
too.
Bybee to the podcast. Hi, Veeda.
Hi, it's so great to be here with you all.
Yeah, we're so happy you could be here. We're going to get into all of the story and everything else. I can't wait to talk about it. But the first thing we have to do is I have to ask, what was the most amazing thing you ate this week?
I had something I have had before, and it was surprisingly good. So I went out to eat with my husband, and we had oysters. And I've had them before, but they weren't that wonderful and great. So I was a little hesitant, but we had them and they were so good. And that just made me realize when things are prepared well, they're amazing. And so like I don't know what was on it. It was like there was like this vinaigrette and it was citrus, but it was just actually very delicious.
Nice.
So that was kind of fun.
love-
That was fun for me, like, at this age of my life, to be like, oh, actually, I think oysters are kind of amazing. So,
Isn't it crazy and really interesting how your food taste can change at like different seasons in life? I think it's really, really interesting and to see like how our palate changes as we age and everything else. Like it's new experiences are always really fun. Yeah. What about you, Steve?
I have been working on a corned corned beef for 3 to 4 weeks. I brined it for about, right under 4 weeks. So we cooked it off and, of course, did the whole Irish thing, the potatoes, the cabbage, all that fun stuff. Everything turned out really well. I've never made it from scratch before, and I was pleasantly surprised with how well it came out. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. You had duck fat potatoes with it, right? If I remember correctly.
Duck fat potatoes, because, of course, duck fat makes everything better,
It's not much you could ruin. Go ahead.
Sorry. Are you preparing for St. Patrick's Day with the corned beef, or just?
I am. I like to put a lot of content out, so people who are watching will have some sort of idea of how to put it all together. So we'll see what happens.
I think it was probably a happy accident, right, Steve? Like you didn't weren't looking at the calendar necessarily.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've been meaning to do it like for the last few years, and then every time I start to brine it, it's already like a couple days before St. Patrick's Day. So I'm like, well, we'll do it next year. And next year finally came around in 2025,
Nice. Let's see.
This
week, this previous week, I actually prepped some scallop potatoes and I added ham, broccoli, and jalapeno to it to kind of make it like a more complete meal. Whatever. Not to say I wouldn't eat potatoes by themselves as a complete meal too, but I was like, well, I'm going to put some protein and a vegetable in there. And so I like meal prepped it and cut it into squares and portioned it out. I had that with some tofu tikka masala that I made yesterday. And it was really fantastic. Kind of the two things together, like cheesy and tikka and, tofu and green beans and all the veggies and stuff. It was a really good mixture. It was an odd flavor combination, but I found that I liked it a lot.
Big mix of flavor. I like it.
It was kind of weird. But so am I. So here we are. Well, Veeda, in case you don't know, Steven's in Midland, Texas, and I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. And where are you located?
I'm in Las Vegas. It's a little chilly for me today, too.
Oh, wow. I love Vegas. I went one time when I turned 21 and have never been back, probably for the best. But
I've been there 4 times, and I always go for the food, not the gambling,
Yeah.
For me, that's the fun.
Yeah.
Vegas has amazing food.
They do.
And, I know the Strip is very popular, but like we go not to the Strip very often, and like just the local scene is so like I love Chinatown. There's so many great inventive things, and this is so fun for me to hear you guys talk about food in a way that is different than my everyday life. This is really fun.
I love it. Yeah. Well, I want to know all about how did you become connected to food other than liking to eat, obviously. And I think that, probably maybe liking to cook a little bit too, but like, how's that journey start? You should take us from the beginning.
Right. Well, I have always had a desire to bake. Like I grew up with I think it's like the 1980s. It's like an orange binder from Betty Crocker, with kind of like your basic meals. And I remember reading that and just loving how the cat cake was described and just how you cut it. But the unfortunate thing is that when I would make the recipes myself, they just wouldn't turn out very well. I was a kid, but also I found out much later in life, we never had like real butter in our house because we grew up in the 80s and so all those sticks were
margarine.
Yeah.
And I was out grocery shopping with a college roommate, and she asked me to pass her some butter. And I gave her some margarine because that was the cheapest. I always went cheapest. And she said, "Oh, that's not butter, that's margarine." And it was like this epiphany that went off. Like, oh, it's not maybe necessarily me that is making the cookies or the frosting not get fluffy. It's the ingredients I was using.
You have any dairy solids in there? It's all oil.
Exactly,
Oh no.
yeah. And that was really enlightening. So I have liked food, but when I got married, my husband and I, it was interesting. We realized that we didn't share the same taste in TV. Like he liked really offbeat comedy and like sports, and I'm like, I was in a reality TV phase, and so like we just didn't share some things, but we both appreciated food, so we started watching a lot of food TV.
Nice.
So the first years of our marriage, we watched a lot of like Food Network, but also Top Chef, and I just love Anthony Bourdain had his show, and it was just so fun to experience how food can transform and take you to different places. So, so I had that, but then we also cooked a lot together. Earlier in my life, I also had a food blog for a couple of years.
Cool.
And that was really fun until it wasn't fun. I don't know. It's just so much work, right? So
it's a lot. Having any type of media presence that like you're not getting paid for, right? Is kind of like it almost becomes a second job, and it's a lot. It's a lot. It can be a lot. So
it's funny that you were talking about like growing up with an orange binder with recipes, because I did pretty much the same thing. I've never really thought about it up until you said that. So I grew up with, it was a cookbook. It was orange, kind of like a binder, and it was called La Piñata. And it had a lot of recipes too. And just like you, I would try to make some of those recipes, and it just didn't come out until like later, when I was a teenager getting a little bit more experience. But that's funny that you say that,
I'm fairly certain that my grandma either had some of those binders. I know that she had some of the Betty Crocker like entertaining cookbooks, and then Betty Crocker had recipe boxes as well through the 70s and 80s that had little tabs, and these tabs would be the most ridiculous names, right? It would be like entertaining on a budget. My favorite is like taking care of your man, like the most outdated, like, not that there's anything wrong with that specifically. It's just like the funny things in the 70s and 80s that people were like, men like to eat this and women like to eat that, like women eat Jell-O salads and men eat meat. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know,
like some of the craziest. But hey, in my house, I grew up with Country Crock, and I can't bring myself to buy it now, but if somebody has it at their house, I'm like putting extra on the rolls. I'm like, yes, this is delicious. I remember just butter flavored oil in a tub. Like, yes.
That's funny.
I get it. Well, how's the journalism come into this, Veeda?
So in college, I majored in journalism, and I love it. Like, I love journalists. I think they're quite amazing to do the work they do. So when I graduated, I did some freelance work, but nothing really full time. But that study of writing short and with the lead, you have to write mostly everything in the beginning. It really helped me with the writing that I've done later on in life. And I just really like people too. So like that journalism background, getting to know people and talking with others.
That definitely helps.
Yes. And I feel like food, you both have this podcast, you're talking to other people too, but there's something, I don't know, it's interesting how all things connect. So I feel like my journalism background, my love of food, and the writing I do now, which is a lot of more children's book fiction writing, I think they really all do connect in different ways. So so it's just a neat thing where I feel like things you're attracted to are not for nothing, like they do tie back in.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of, I'm older now, so it's kind of fun to see how those things have intersected. I'm excited to see how other things in my life will also play in.
Yeah, it's crazy. Something like, they say hindsight's 2020. I mean, Steve and I will say that, food unites us. Steve and I had not talked for 22 years since culinary school, and then he came on my dinky little podcast, like episode 3, and here we are. It's like episode 102 now, I think. Yep. So, and we have reconnected, and it's crazy how those journeys through life will intersect and unfold and meander and take detours. It's wild when you get to see the big picture part of that on the other side. Is like amazing. So,
we had to find our own ways before we connected back together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I love technology, you can talk from Texas and North Carolina. Like you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It was almost nothing for us to get it started. And the technology it's changing the food landscape in that way too. How we get recipes, how we see information, how we have access to ingredients and everything else. And I'm sure every generation before us could say the same, right? Like,
Yeah.
Just even something like I was talking the other day about making a curry. I called it a grocery store curry. It wasn't really a term of endearment. It was kind of like I cheated. I took the lazy way. But the fact that you can find a curry concentrate in a store, whereas 30 years ago, you wouldn't been able to. And you would have had to know exactly where to go in your neighborhood and who to talk to find like all the individual ingredients. It's just how, things like that happen. And now we have everything at our fingertips. You know what I mean?
Yeah, part of my food journey happened about like 20 years ago too. My mom, she passed away and she had ovarian cancer. And before she was, because she knew she was getting ready to go. And so she like left me this mission, like, I want you to write down all my recipes. And so I was like, okay, mom, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
But she, I'd call her and okay, mom, how do I make this? And she was like, I don't know. And so like it ended up me being, I actually have to make them myself. And so that was that's what I kind of started food blogging that journey. And that was really interesting because back then, like 20 years ago, I have some Thai and Lao and Chinese, that's my heritage, but none of those recipes were available. Like I couldn't just like search up, this recipe because it just wasn't there. So that was kind of interesting to see how that's progressed from 20 years ago now, where now there's like so many recipes you can find online and having that journey too. But yeah, it was kind of this thing with finding those recipes of my mom and things growing up, which led me into really appreciating food and how it really does connect us to some of the things we are like growing up and then in our experiences now too.
Yeah, it really, really does.
I was going to say, I can remember my mom telling me pretty much the same thing. Like, let's get a lot of the recipes that I've done or that we've done over the years. So I'll ask her, well, how do you make tortillas, for example? Because, I'm Hispanic and that's what we grew up with. And she says, I don't remember. If I do it off the top of my head, it's a little bit of this. It's like, this doesn't help me, So we're going to have to learn this together. So.
Yeah, and I feel I feel like the recipes are too, like they may come from your mom, but like they become part of you, and it just gets passed on from generation. And each time someone cooks something, even though they're finding it on a cookbook or online, it also becomes kind of their trajectory too. So I hope, like with the cookbook that I have out too, I hope that anyone making that recipe, it also become part of theirs too. Like they'll make the caramel sauce and they go, oh, this is. Even though I found it on this cookbook, it's also mine too. And I think that's really the neat thing about food, how we're all just like linked up in a way.
Yeah.
When I was writing my cookbook, the same thing happened with me. It's how, these are simple recipes, but how do I put my twist on them? How do I make them mine and then share them with the world, So I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the interesting things is like, I like to posit sometimes that Americans don't have, a lot of our own food heritage. Like it's just very much the melting pot of the people that make up the country and the people that built the nation, right? And so we'll grasp onto anything, right? That's why like Jell-O salad with celery in it becomes popular in the 50s because we don't have anything else unless you have something in your family that's been passed down and passed down and passed down. But then you start to think about like, how do new generations actually come up with a tradition? Right. And what makes it so special? Well, the only thing that makes a tradition special is that you keep it. Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where it came from. It doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter where you found it. Right. So if somebody finds that caramel sauce in your book and it becomes like this cherished memory of every single Christmas. Well, then that's it. There's that barrier to entry is broken. Right. Their great somebody in their family didn't have to be making this caramel sauce for it to be this special integral part of their story. And I think that's how these stories get like rewritten. It's really, really special. Well, tell us about the cookbook.
Yes. So it is called A Few of My Favorite Things. Recipes inspired by, what is it? I'm forgetting that. Oh yeah. Family friendly musicals. Thank you. And so it's a cookbook based off of musicals. And so it's broken up into different acts, for to say. Like there's an opening act, which is like breakfast. And you have act 2. Intermission snacks.
Oh, I love that.
The act 2 is like the entree, the main act, and there's a finale of desserts.
I love it.
Yeah, I had so much fun with this cookbook. But the title is also a play on The Sound of Music. A few of my favorite things is a song on there, but they're also like honestly my favorite recipes, and I was able to incorporate them into this cookbook, and it's just been so fun.
I love it.
I love the fact that you were like, it's act 1, act 2. What made you, I mean, are you really into musicals? Is that like one of your favorite things, or?
Yes, I was not for a while, and it's like part of this project of making this helped bring that back to me, because it was like, the pandemic was like 5 years ago, and this was a pandemic project where my family and we cooked a recipe from a music, like we watched the musical and made a recipe from that musical. Either it was mentioned from that musical, or there's a time period, or like it kind of had a theme with that. We did it for a whole entire year. And so that's really
awesome.
Bring it back to me, because I did grow up loving musicals. Like I loved Annie, I loved My Fair Lady. As an American, I love all things British. Like so. Those kind of productions and the food are just like, I think the names are so fun. Like Bubble and Squeak. Like what? It's fun. Like what is Bubble and Squeak? And so researching that was really
delicious.
Fun.
Is what it is. My grandmother collected cookbooks, and she liked to sit. I mean, undoubtedly, she had amassed this huge amount of cookbooks by the time that she passed away, that I know that she never cooked anything out of any of them, right? Or she might have cooked one thing, but she liked to sit with a cookbook and read it like it was a novel. She liked to learn about she would like read all the little blurbs and the stories in between and stuff. And so when I got a hold of this thing, I sat down and read it. And I haven't cooked anything out of it yet, but I can't wait. But it was so sweet to be like, here's the musical. This is what inspired it. Like, here's how you can use it. I love that stuff too. And I probably come by it honestly, right? But I love seeing stuff in here. It reminds me, there was the first cookbook I ever got, I think I was like 6 or 7, and it was a Walt Disney World and Friends cookbook.
Really?
Like a sugar cookie recipe in it that was like Huey, Dewey, and Louie or something like that. And I still use it because it's a good sugar cookie recipe. You know what I mean? But those things stay with you, and especially when things like Broadway musicals and Disney musicals are part of your consciousness as a kid growing up in the United States, right? Like it's just very much in your consciousness. And so I think this is like so cool. And look, I mean, it's just vivid. Like this is the pulled pork.
Pulled pork, yeah.
So yeah, I love it. From Lilo and Stitch, which I also love. So
well, I appreciate, because you both are like professionals in the food industry, and I don't have that kind of background. Like I never went to, I just have never worked in a restaurant or done that kind of thing. So I'm very just honored that you find some value in this, as a home cook.
100%.
But
it's
so
one of those things where we can learn from you just as much as you can learn from us. So, as we're having a good conversation like we're having now, and we're learning something new, it's always value added, So
and that's kind of like the whole idea of the podcast, right? It's like you don't have to be a chef. Like everything can be food for thought. The conversation can exist and educate each other just as much to educate as it is to entertain. But there's no gatekeeping. Like if everybody sits down at the table, is like you don't have to have the word chef in front of your name, right? And I'd argue there's plenty of people out there with it in front of their name that also aren't. So I love something like this where you're seeing where the food can bring families together. It was really, really special. So
thanks, Melissa.
Yeah.
Well, I like how you mentioned your grandmother just would, because I do the same thing with cookbooks. I love the voice of the author. So Dory Greenspan is my favorite baker. She's a cookbook called Baking from My Home to Yours. And I would take it into bed with me and read. I just love her voice and how she describes recipes and the food. So I kind of wanted to do that too, because putting my writing background into that as well. Like when someone's cooking these recipes, I hope they also get like a little sense of just like who I am too, or where we came up from this. And I think food's really neat how you can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, Steve and I have talked about it before with other guests, right? Like one of the best ways to get to know a culture that came before you, or a historic people, or a new place, is to taste the food. This is the first thing I do when I travel is where are we going to eat, not what are we going to see.
Very important.
Yeah. So yeah. Has it always been Las Vegas, Veeda, or somewhere else?
I'm a military kid, so I've lived a lot of different places. I grew up in Virginia, so went to high school in Northern Virginia there, but we've been in Vegas for quite a long time now, so this is home.
Any favorite restaurants around?
Oh, I mean, like there's like expensive favorite. So Raku, if you ever come, it's like a Japanese, it's a Japanese restaurant, but it's not like, it's more like the small plates, like the fire grill. It is so delicious.
Like izakaya style dining with
Yeah.
little small plates. Yep.
That's one of my all-time favorite places. It's so
love
good. And there's another place called Viva Las Arepas, and this is just way more casual, but it's kind of near the strip too. And it's like they have, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but like chapa, but it's the corn. It's like a corn sandwich in a way, or a cornmeal with cheese in it.
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And any place that makes their name a pun, like I'm immediately in. So, immediately.
I think the last time I was in Vegas, we ate at a restaurant called Amano, and it's like 20 minutes north of the strip or something like that. And I came across it off Instagram, and it was just like an Italian place that does all these strange concoctions. It's like a calzone and a pizza around it, or they'll stuff like a big old bread with like pasta, carbs on carbs on carbs. And I ate there, and it was really good. It was something, the experience alone was just unique. Again, you're just getting this big old massive, French loaf full of pasta and shrimp and all sorts of weirdness. If you ever have a chance to check it out, I'd recommend it.
Okay, I haven't been to Amano. Yeah, if you're in Vegas, let me know. Like there's so many fun places here. Even like even on this show, like there's a secret pizza place, which actually is, it's called Secret Pizza. It's not really, it's in the Cosmo Hotel, and that's really fun.
That's super fun. I was gonna say it's not a secret now. You just said it.
And it's on Yelp, and they call it Secret Pizza, but it's not really
fun.
Yeah, it's part of their marketing.
I love it. I think I would like to go back to Vegas at some point as a not 21-year-old. I mean, we had really amazing food there, but I think I could appreciate it more now as a culinary professional. Is there any like Lao culinary representation in the Vegas area that you're aware of?
So there is a grocery store that sells food. I will go to sometimes. And so that's kind of neat, but well, actually, you know what? So there's a restaurant that's very famous called Lotus of Siam, and it's a Thai restaurant, but they have Northern Thai food, which Lao backs up to. So they have a lot of those Thai and Lao dishes, and it is delicious. So there is this it's like a fried rice salad, and it's so good. So it's like my favorite thing ever. And I've tried recreating it because, but they just do it so much better than I do. So I love to get it there,
Yeah, I love that so much. I mean, I think it probably has to be pretty meaningful to have something nearby that's kind of like so close maybe to what you grew up with. I mean, I can't obviously speak for what you grew up with, obviously, but you get the idea, right? I think this probably has to be particularly gratifying just to have something that little connection, right, to your heritage is like at least local,
Yeah. Well, and growing up in the military, we didn't have I didn't eat like Lao Thai food all the time, but it's funny though, whenever we went back to California to see my mom's side of the family, they would always have this like rice dish. And it's I'm trying to think of like what it's it's called like, coconut rice dish or just, but it's, and I always like, oh, they always have this, but it's like, they actually don't always eat it. They just always got it when my mom came into town because it's like a celebration thing, So that was kind of fun.
That's
like,
nice.
They always have this when we go there. They eat it all the time, but they don't. It's just because
they were always celebrating you, which is even more special. Oh, that's nice. Now you were like the company that they made it for. So
yes.
Oh, that's excellent. Now, growing up, you said you were kind of stationed all over the place. Like, were you there for so many years and tried to find like restaurants or like, how was that for you growing up?
Well, being in the military, you live on base. And so it's not like I'm fully immersed in places, but we did spend some time in South Korea where we did live off the base. And, I had the experience of like, you drink the barley water because you can't drink the regular tap water, that kind of thing too. So I think my family, they're pretty adventurous for what you can when you still have a very American environment living on a base and having that, which I also love and appreciate too. So we lived in, and this is when I was really young, but we lived in West Germany before the wall came down. And so that like I love all the, the German chocolates that they're imported here now too. But that was just kind of fun growing up with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. Do you have I think by and large, with the exception of a few companies here, that the Europeans do chocolate better. It might be a hot take,
yeah.
but that's what I think. So
No, it's true. And I don't know what the difference is. Maybe you guys know, but even when they're imported here, they taste different. Like I feel like some of the English chocolates I've had
I think
over
it's
there.
the amount of fat in the butter.
Yeah.
And I think that it is probably whatever they have to add to make it stable to import it is probably takes away from some of or changes the texture a bit or something like that, yeah. I was going to ask you if you have a favorite recipe from a few of my favorite things. Like if somebody picked this up for the first time, where should they start at the beginning? As Julie Andrews says, a very good place to start, or which one's your favorite, like the hallmark?
That's such a good question. I thought that more people would start at the very beginning, so I did make a pretty approachable recipe. It's these Baroque French toast sticks.
Yep.
And because I thought it's a pretty simple one to do, but I've actually been surprised to hear the different ones that have been made. So I do like that recipe a lot. Like I tested it out with my kids, and we make it out of Texas toast. So it's a French toast, but they're just thick pieces of those sticks, and it's a play on Baroque, which is for Beauty and the Beast, that French word in art. So that was kind of fun. But I think I'm really proud of the baked Alaska recipe, which I've actually never had outside of my own home, because that just, I don't know, that does not really exist, in restaurants. But so I'm assuming it's right, but it's like a cake with an ice cream dome, and then it's layered with Italian meringue.
Or you just don't have it out in restaurants because it's the best at your house. No one makes it better than you. That's what it is.
We just spoke to the owner and proprietor of Delmonico's, like one of the oldest continuous running restaurants in the United States in Manhattan. And they started baked Alaska. So it's so funny that you would bring it up. It's really wild. So I was like, oh wow.
For that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I do need to go to New York. So maybe I can get like one of their original ones there. So
yeah.
But so I've just turned to the baked Alaska ice cream cake, and it says it's from Annie. I must not have even paid attention to it enough to know that it was there, right? So, and I think that was a cool part of flipping through this book too, right? Was like, oh, I don't remember that, or oh yeah, I remember that, or I remember this lyric, I remember where it was, So
yeah, and some of the musicals, there's not food featured a lot, but they're like, it's in the song. So when Annie goes to Daddy Warbucks' house for the first time, they're telling her what the menu is going to be, and her eyes just light up. And I remember thinking, I remember thinking some of those things that they talk about, they just sound so amazing. So as a little kid, I always wanted to know, what is this baked Alaska, or like in Greece, they talked about these like Coke floats, and that was such a novelty. Like, what is a Coke float? Like, I didn't, so that's kind of fun to make up and see. And I wish we still had those soda shops around. Like, that would be so fun.
Yeah. One of the ones that was, there are two in Texas that I knew of, and they just both closed recently. They didn't really make it through COVID, but it was like an old-fashioned soda shop and pharmacy attached to both. One was in Dallas and one was in a smaller town called Kaufman. But really, really neat places where you could get the soda made, right? Like they're using the syrups and like adding the soda water to it, which is just something really special that you don't see everywhere.
I've never seen that anywhere, So,
yeah. Yeah, it's part of that. It's that fun 50s Americana that I think like our generations really missed out on. But you see it played out in things like Grease and Happy Days and stuff, right? Like you can use soda shops and soda fountains. So I love that. And Steve is just as much of a coconut fiend as I am. And I'm going to have to share this with him, the High Tide Coconut Butter Mochi from Moana, and also Lilo and Stitch. Like it's just a couple of pages up from the baked Alaska, but that's probably going to be the first thing that I make because I just got my hands on some really great rice flour. So I think this is what's going to happen right here. And I love that that it's an unsweetened coconut milk. And I have type 2 diabetes, so I'm probably going to sub half Splenda in this just so I can do more of it. But yeah, so I'm excited.
So I take it you learned a lot when you were putting this book together, Are you self-published author?
This one's through a publisher. and they're
Excellent.
called Shadow Mountain, and they're just a smaller regional publisher, but I'm just so grateful for that opportunity because I think I'd have a hard time putting that together on my own.
Because I know when I was putting mine together, I learned a lot. Like I did as much self-publishing as possible, but
Mhm.
like I had someone printed out of Houston, things like that. But I had no clue what an ISBN number was, and like I never thought about paper, things like that. So I take it you learned quite a bit while you were putting this together, huh?
I did. So working with them, so they did the book layout, and
Hmm.
I did take all the photos though on my own, which I'm kind of amazed that happened, because I'm not a trained photographer. But you just kind of say yes to projects when someone says, they're going to offer you this. I'm like, yeah, you just say yes, and then you figure it out on the way. And so,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to like fake it until you make it, right?
yeah,
I mean, the pictures in this are incredible. They're glossy. They're really high
Hmm.
quality. It looks like a food photographer took them. So great job.
thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Kudos.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Uh,
Well,
yeah.
having
Go
having
ahead.
the food blog years ago has helped, like having that
Hmm.
experience to do that kind of thing. But also I think technology is really good. I mean, they're all from my iPhone, which is
Oh wow.
yeah.
I
It's
got lucky.
incredible.
Yeah, I got lucky every step of the way. A friend of mine that I hadn't talked to in years, come to find out, he was a professional photographer. So he helped
Okay.
me out. So we would have like just sessions where we would put like 15 plates together and, take as many pictures as we possibly could. And then my mother in law used to put books together for a living. So she taught me quite a bit about that too. So, I couldn't believe like just, it was like, going down that rabbit hole of what do you mean there's different types of papers? Oh, we could do glass. What it was just insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I just had a lot of fun doing it. I would imagine that did you clearly did them in your own home, right?
Mhm.
Did you have your kids helping you too? Did they have a lot of fun or how did that work?
Yeah, so they helped me, obviously eat the food and taste it,
There
but,
you go.
they
Yeah.
they they'd help along the way too, and so but when I was, like, styling it, they would help me move things here, but it was pretty
Uh-huh.
much like I feel like it was a fever dream sometimes doing those dishes because, when you're a deadline, like, "Okay, I have to do, like, 7 dishes today," you know? Um, so if I did it again, I would love to work with a photographer, but
Uh-huh.
there wasn't the kind of budget for that, but at the same time, I do love this is, like, it's all my own in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and I love how in this time there are so many ways to publish. So I have friends who are like writers of fiction, and they do really really
Mhm.
well for themselves by like indie publishing, and I think that's amazing because I think there doesn't have to be one way to do anything. And so if someone wants to do a cookbook, or a regular novel, you can, and you actually can find an audience, and there is a lot of learning, and there's a lot of growth from that,
Uh-huh.
but I personally know people that do like they support their families off of writing and just
Yeah.
publishing on their own, which is incredible to me.
So
I love that.
do you have people asking you, so when's your next cookbook coming out? You
I have been asked that. I don't know. I mean, I never want to say no to anything, but it was so hard. I don't know, Stephen. Like
I'm 7 years later. Oh yeah, the next one's in the works, and I have no. Mm-mm. So
I think that I can't imagine how daunting a task it is to say like I got 7 recipes to do today. It's one of those things where like almost when you start to monetize something you love, then you won't love it anymore, right? Like I'm
uh-huh.
just like, oh, I can't. I would be like, screw this. I don't want to do this. I had a good friend who put out a family cookbook, kind of like like a spiralized binding,
mhm.
printed it in house and stuff. She put out a Kickstarter, and a lot of us who joined, she had us testing the recipes. She just wanted to
Okay.
know if they were
Yep.
functional or not. She would send us a picture of a handwritten recipe and like, can you make this? And be like, this one turned out great. This one was terrible. I don't know like what happened here, but this one should be like, all right, well, it's not going to go in the book, right? Like I would have to crowdsource, I think,
Mhm.
that type of process because I just don't have the bandwidth to do all of
Yeah.
that.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I went through that as well. I had a lot of friends, test out the recipes. Were they easy to follow? How did they come out? Did you like
Mhm.
them? And just waiting for them to actually do it because of course everyone's got their own things going on. You're just kind of biting your nails.
yeah. In a way, publishing a cookbook is different than a fiction work, but it's also kind of the
Yeah.
same too. Because I have like editors and agents, but also, I had people for the cookbook who tests the recipes as well.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when I write a regular book, you also have beta readers too. And so I use the same mentally. I use the same process of writing a cookbook that I did with like a regular book. Like I just try to tackle it a little at a time, because if I feel like I'm gonna do this whole cookbook, I'm gonna feel so overwhelmed. Just like if I'm gonna write a whole book.
And sometimes
Yeah.
it's like that old saying, right? Like, how do you eat an elephant? Like, you one bite at a time,
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
you could almost lose the plot if you worked on too much of it. Even if you were writing a regular, let's say like a fiction work, you have your outline, you would have like your pictures of the spaces that inspired the setting, you would have like
Mhm.
plot map or whatever. I mean, listen to me, I've never written a book, right? I have a couple friends who have, but I know that there's a huge process, and you have to be able to see like the micro and the macro at the same time. So it's like if you bit off too much of it at one time, then maybe it wouldn't make sense. You know what I mean? And I imagine it's the same for
Yeah,
cookbook.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
I taught at a writing conference a couple of weeks ago. I did a class on revision, and I called it Recipe for Revision, and I broke it down
Food fun. Food
with like
puns.
your first draft is like your mise en place. You're just gathering all the ingredients and the words, and they're not anything yet. And so like,
Yep.
each draft of revision, it becomes more and more closer to the final product. And I like, that's so cool. I love that I could make a food analogy for that too.
I love it. I'm like, I'm in. Food puns.
Yeah.
You got me. You got me. I could mise en place. Like, look at you using chef words. Love it.
I mean, yeah, I really
So,
respect people in the food industry, because I think it's so cool. I think it's so neat to have that professionally, and to have that knowledge, because our family, we really do. It's like part of our identity. Like I think we just really relate with what food can bring into your life. It's just such a wonderful thing. So yeah.
yeah, the kitchen was the center of the home for a long time. It didn't really stop being that way until like 60s, 70s architecture. Like they would start making the living room, and a lot of that was like color TV and network television and sitcoms and everything else, and like people working more outside the home and everything. But the kitchen and the hearth used to be the center of the home where the family made the most of their connections. So it's like a dying art that people are trying to keep alive, like within their own families, which I think is awesome, because food is part of how we tell our story. It's who we are, so it's who we are. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, do you still have that feeling like, okay, I'm a cookbook author now? Like, has that reality kicked in? 'Cause there are a lot of times where, I mean, even to this day, like Melissa, she pumps my cookbook up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did write a book.
Yeah. Well, I am talking about it, with this, and so it does
Mhm.
feel that way. But I've loved actually hearing just people that I know, like my neighbors or friends. Like one woman said she shared her. So she made the caramel sauce was on my mind, because she made something and she
Uh-huh.
brought it to like a book club, and they're like, "Oh, where did you get this?" And she said, "Oh, it's from Veda's cookbook," and she shared that, and I'm like, that was kind of a cool thing. Like, oh, someone's actually making these recipes, and that's a really neat feeling.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like this is the thing that happened in real
I
life.
know.
Amazing, right? Like, I love that.
Yeah, again, I always forget that I have that book, because it's always so hard to sell yourself. You know what I'm saying? And without sounding like you're just very full of yourself. So I'm always glad that the connections I have made over the years, especially since my book came out, it's friends, people who support me, who are saying, "Man, this book, it's awesome." As a matter of fact, my brother was saying he gave one of my books to, I guess, one of his friends or something like that. And he says, "Steven, they make recipes out of your book like 5 times a week." So
I
hearing
love
things
that.
like that, yeah, it's excellent. And you kind of like want to stay as humble as possible. So I'm sure you get that a lot, right?
I mean, not a lot, but it is neat to hear, and to think like, a part of it, it's like, I can't believe I'm living this dream. I get to write for a living. I never, like, I do not have a huge following online. So to have
Mhm,
a cookbook, I just never imagined that. Like, of course I've dreamt it, but
mhm.
it's kind of neat to have this
Well, we're going to
actually
help
in
grow
fruition.
that now.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
where can people find your book?
Pretty much anywhere books are sold. So it's on, like, you can get it online at Barnes and Nobles or Amazon, that kind of thing. Through the publisher Shadow Mountain, they also have it there as well. So yeah.
And
We're
I
gonna
have
have to
a
exchange some information, because I'm still trying. I still got a few more books left, and I've
Okay.
just been selling them all out of my house, and I signed every single one of them, things like that. But just trying, after so many years of just selling them at like farmers markets, stuff like that. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I really need to get the initiative to like sell them off Amazon, just send them to like the warehouse, things like that,
So I'm going to have to buy another copy because I think I know exactly who I'm going to send this to. I have some cousins that are huge into musicals and love to cook. And I think that they would adore this. But I can't wait to share it with them. And then I'll get myself another copy because there's stuff I want to cook out of it. But Veeda, have you ever like gone into anywhere local that sells your book and like shadow signed them? If it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I've got, so because I'm a children's book author too, some of my books are in different places. I don't know. I'm kind of like, and I know some authors like, oh, can I sign that stock copy? I just haven't done it yet. But I will take pictures like, oh, look, here's this book,
Ooh, found it in the wild, right?
Yeah,
like, oh,
that's really exciting,
Tell us about Team Awkward and the other things that you've written.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm co-writing a series for middle grade, like 8 to 12 kids. It's called Team Awkward. And it's with Joy McCullough. And we are co-writers. And it's about a group of girls. Like there's 4 girls. They're in 6th grade. And they all have a really embarrassing first day of school. So they all kind of go into this secret locker room only they can see. And it becomes like their safety place. And they will gather there. And that's really fun. So the first book came out in February. The next one's out in June. This is like one of the biggest publishing years for me I've ever had and probably never will again. I also have another middle grade book coming out this October. It's called The Invincible List of Lonnie Lee, and that's October 7th. And that's about a girl who she discovers she needs to be brave. And so she uses this Chinese mythology that she grew up with about these invincible brothers. And she takes on this challenge to do each of their superpowers in her own way to have some strength to do something for her brother. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited for that one.
How do you find the inspiration to write that? I couldn't I couldn't do things like that.
Well, that book has been 12 years in the making. So that's like one of those projects where it got me, my first steps into publishing with my first couple agents. It's had so many rejections. So I'm just so grateful, like it's actually going to see the light of day. So that work has been a work of love. And it's developed over time too, so, but there are other things like Team Awkward, like they've been faster to write because I'm just a more experienced author at this time. But having projects that have taken longer, it's worthwhile too. But those are hard as well to kind of like see outside what you thought of it was.
They'll have like the most reward. Maybe it's like the long awaited, kind of reward at the end. That's so amazing. Like as an adult, I'd read those.
Same.
Like, no shame at all. Like I would definitely read those. There's some, I would even say that even further, like even earlier than what they would call young adult, like there are some really treasured books that throughout my life where I'm like, I can go back and read that. Like I have some things in Audible, like Johnny Tremaine was a favorite, just from my childhood. And sometimes I'll read it again because now it feels comfort. You know what I mean? Like now it feels comfortable. What was what got you into journalism in the first place besides liking people? And like, what did you find that you were using that degree for what you thought you were, or like how has that turned out now?
It took me a while to get a degree in college. I was not a 4-year student. I had many, like, I think I originally wanted to do art. I loved art all my life, but I went my freshman year to school and I got really psyched out. Like everyone was just so good. So I decided not to do art. I did like marketing or English. And it's interesting to see. I don't know. One of my roommates was doing journalism. I'll try journalism, and I actually really liked it because I liked like it was writing, but I didn't feel like I don't think I was brave enough to say I wanted to be a creative writer, and do that kind of thing. And I think it's okay. Like I think having that path of journalism was what I needed to have that confidence because with journalism, you publish like you don't have to wait years and years to get a book deal, or you just like write for a paper. And we had a school paper, it's called the Daily Universe. And that was like really interesting to see like my articles. I would be like sitting in class because back then, this is like 20 years ago, people actually had papers. And I would see people like reading.
I'm like, what's a paper?
I know. And so that kind of gave me confidence to like, and like, oh, I actually really do love writing because I feel like I can share things that are important, but also just myself that way too. So I did journalism for a little bit, but never really, really full time. Like I never worked. I was as a full-time staff writer, but I did a lot of freelance work. So Yeah, I really love having that in my background too. So I have a middle grade nonfiction collection. It's called Shining a Light, celebrating 40 Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders who changed the world. And that book came out a
Nice.
couple of years ago, and I love it. I wrote about like just like a one-page biography about an individual, and then the illustrator, Vito Nye, she did the illustrations, and it's just so beautiful. And that's a really meaningful project to me.
I love that so much. I'm gonna have to look into it. I have a collection of books like that. Are he's celebrating different ethnic groups and different like just significant contributions to history, but that oftentimes get overwritten.
Yeah.
Because the people that write history are usually like white men. So yeah, not to get too far down a rabbit trail, but I love things like that that are celebrating the voices that are often not amplified. And I think it's like really, really important, and especially to do that at a middle age level, a middle school, level is so important. It's
Yeah.
super important because it's formative, and like when the kids are like forming opinions and figuring out the things they believe, or they're figuring out like what their own story is. So that's so cool. I love that so much.
Yeah,
What
one
do
of
you?
the people. Oh, sorry.
No,
One of
please.
the people I wrote about is Cecilia Chang, and
Mm,
I didn't quite realize, but she helped define Chinese food for us now. Like,
mm,
'cause back when she was, living, Chinese food it wasn't very like high class, but she grew up like, very wealthy, in China, with like, she kind of grew up in a palace, and then like some conflict happened, and she had to leave all that, and so,
mhm.
she started a restaurant in San Francisco called, oh my gosh, I think it was, I think it's the Mandarin. I'm forgetting now, but it was like the place to go, and they had all these rock stars go there, and so she helped us. She helped bring Chinese food back into like more elevated fine dining, and PF Chang's is started by her son, and so it's just kind of neat to see all these
Wow.
different
Oh
connections, and
wow,
you know having that history, in the book too. So
I love it. I love it. I love it. I think it's interesting to see the journey of Chinese food in America and kind of like the more traditional like Mandarin style dishes, and then kind of the Americanized Chinese food, which is what like a lot of like what I grew up with, and kind of the origins of things like chop suey, and how Asian food as a whole like was kind of treated with this. It was like this forbidden fruit type deal.
Mhm.
Like there was a lot of like the narrative around it was like this is exotic, and it's it's exotic, and it's like this hidden treasure that we have to then later on would be like exploited. But kind of bringing it back to the real history and seeing like, no, these were like pioneers in our business now, who are making this approachable and popular for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love writing about her, learning about her and what she did, through food and how she kind of changed things too.
Yeah.
Are there any other influences that had an impact on you like this?
Yeah, in that book, especially
Mhm.
because they're about Asian Americans. So Luke Ten Eli, he was also in San Francisco, and
Mhm.
he helped us shape Chinatown to what it is now. Like before, it was just like a regular place, and he just kind of helped bring it to this like destination. And I thought that was really interesting. And learning more about him, I think like, he doesn't know that we have Chinatowns all over the world because of his vision of making it a
Yeah.
more desirable place after
Yeah.
the 1906 earthquake. So I really like, it's just so cool to read about these individuals and just how, um, you know, everybody has some sort of influence, whether we know it or
Right.
not. They could be really big or
Mhm.
small, but
Right.
like having their examples, I hope kids can see that and see like, oh wow, this is like this because of this person. Maybe I could one of these days, something I do will also have a change or impact as well.
Yeah, representation, man. It
Yeah.
matters. Like it's really amazing. I have a lot to read now. I've got to go down to the library and
Right.
get some stuff. Like this is awesome. Well, Vita, are you cooking anything this week?
I made some curry last night, just some like green curry. Um, my daughter,
I
I have a
love
college
green
age daughter,
curry.
and she's in town, and so I just made a big batch, because
Mhm.
um, so that's just I just made that. For us, I try like we have like a 1 day a week. I don't know how you guys do it, but we have like 1 day a week. I'll say, okay, we'll eat out 1 day a week. That gives me kind of a break. And other days I'll just double up. So we'll have curry again tonight, because we had it last night. So
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
It's kind of similar. Steve, how often do you eat out? Do you and Ursula
Um,
decide ahead of time?
Once or twice a week, only because we're starting to do a little bit more of the meal prep and trying to figure out what we're going to eat. Um,
Yeah.
but there are days where you just don't feel like doing anything. So yeah,
No.
you go out and eat. Exactly.
Yeah, mine's kind of, there really aren't any rules for me. I work very long shifts as a chef, and sometimes I want to eat at home, and sometimes as a single person, meal prepping gets a little bit boring. So make something and eat it 4 times is just really not how I roll. So I might eat it twice, freeze the rest of it, come back to it in about 15 days, and then I always joke with Steve about this. I'll text him. I'll be like, I just bought all these things from the grocery store. And now I'm going to go eat sushi because I don't want to eat any of them. Like, no
It
thanks.
happens to me more often than not too. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I have aspirations to meal prep. I don't know if you've had anybody on your podcast that's a good meal prepper, but I'm like, I always want to do it. Like I bought all the containers, like, okay, I'm gonna, take this for my lunches and that kind of stuff. And I have not used them really yet. So.
It's one of those things that you just have to white knuckle grind out. Like eventually you have to get to a point where you go like, okay, I'm going to will this to happen. And you have to set aside like an hour or so. And that's interesting. Like, no, we haven't had anybody on who would call themselves like a meal prepper or any influencer in that kind of realm. We have done a couple of episodes just between the two of us about like how we meal prep or the strategies we use or like using leftovers.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's interesting. Like, I wonder if we can find somebody out there that would call themselves like a professional meal prepper. You know what I mean? It's very interesting. So yeah.
There probably is a professional meal prepper out there somewhere too, right?
Oh, I'm sure there's a professional
I read
everything on the internet.
Anyone listening right now, please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah. Yeah. The recording calendar is almost full through the end of April. So come on, get on here. So, well, Veeda, we've had a wonderful time talking to you today. I can't wait to jump into this cookbook, and I'm going to send it to my family. I'm so excited. And then Steve's going to send you a copy of his.
Yes.
It's called Get Your Grub On. I
Yes.
hope that you enjoy it. He gets nothing but compliments on it all the time. I think he's like trying to be really humble and stuff, but I'm going to keep cheerleading. So Veeda, it was a pleasure. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I hope that we can amplify this story and keep it being told and put it out there in the consciousness. Okay. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I admire you both and what you do professionally, and
thank you so much.
loving food too.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. See you later.
Bye.